My name is Carmen Salinas. I'm 28 years old, and for 7 years, I believed I was safe. After my parents died in a car accident while I was still in college, my Uncle Robert and Aunt Elaine took me in without hesitation. Their daughter Naomi was only 3 years older than me, but we grew up close enough that she felt like my sister. We shared clothes, secrets, and those quiet late-night talks on the porch when the house finally went still. When people asked, I usually just said, my sister. It felt simpler, truer. Their house became my anchor during the worst years of my life. Over time, it stopped feeling like their house and started feeling like home. I cooked there, I paid bills, I fixed things that broke. I showed up. I thought that mattered. Last week, everything changed. I finally got the job offer I'd been grinding toward for months. A senior analyst role at a tech company. $92,000 a year plus benefits. The kind of email that makes your hands shake when you read it. The kind that feels like proof that all the grief and exhaustion were leading somewhere. Uncle Robert insisted on celebrating properly. A real dinner, he said. Family dinner. Even Naomi came home early from work, which almost never happened. Her husband Ethan sat beside her, unusually quiet, his hand resting on her knee like he was guarding something fragile. The table was full. Wine glasses clinked. Laughter bounced off the walls. For the first time in years, I felt like my life was finally aligning. Then Ethan cleared his throat. I have an announcement too. Naomi smiled nervously. He squeezed her hand. I'm pregnant. The room exploded. Naomi gasped, then laughed through tears. Uncle Robert jumped up so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. Aunt Elaine cried openly, already talking about baby clothes and nursery colors. I was genuinely happy for them. I really was. I caught myself imagining being the cool aunt, the one who spoiled the baby, showed up to birthdays, helped when things got overwhelming. The celebration rolled on for a few minutes longer. Then Ethan spoke again. There's something else we need to address. The room quieted. He looked straight at me. Now that Naomi is pregnant, he said calmly, I think it's time you found your own place. For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. I laughed. What do you mean? This house is huge. We can rearrange things. Ethan didn't smile. When the baby comes, we'll need privacy, space. Just our immediate family. Immediate family. The phrase landed heavy, like something sharp pressing into my ribs. Naomi didn't look at me. Not once. You have a great job now, Ethan continued. You can afford to move out. I felt my chest tighten. I'm not an outsider, I said quietly. I'm family. Ethan shook his head, like I was being slow. When Naomi is recovering, breastfeeding, vulnerable, it won't be appropriate to have someone outside the family here. Outside the family. 7 years. Holidays, birthdays, late-night talks. And suddenly, I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Naomi finally spoke, her voice hesitant but firm. We've been talking about this for months, Carmen. It's just awkward explaining to people why you still live here. That was when I understood. This wasn't about the baby. This wasn't about privacy. This was about me being inconvenient. And as I looked around that table, at the plates I'd washed, the walls I'd helped paint, the people I'd quietly supported, I realized something that sent a cold shiver through me. They had absolutely no idea whose house they were sitting in. The silence after my last sentence was suffocating. Uncle Robert's jaw tightened. Aunt Elaine folded her hands in her lap, staring at the table like it might crack open and swallow us all. Naomi finally looked at me, confusion flickering across her face. What do you mean? She asked. Carmen, what are you talking about? Ethan scoffed softly, the sound sharp and dismissive. Come on, this isn't the time for jokes. I hadn't planned to say anything that night. I really hadn't. I'd wanted to let it go, let emotions cool, talk privately later. But something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was quieter than that. Like a final thread giving way. I took a slow breath. The day after my parents' funeral, I began. Uncle Robert gave me an envelope. Uncle Robert's head lifted. He knew where this was going. In that envelope, I continued, keeping my voice steady, were every single check I had written to help cover living expenses while I was in college. 14 months worth, $76,500. None of them had been cashed. Aunt Elaine's eyes filled instantly. She pressed a napkin to her mouth. Ethan frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, I said. Uncle Robert told me they couldn't take money for taking in family, I went on. But they knew I needed to feel like I was contributing, so they let me write the checks. Then they saved that money for me. Naomi's face had gone pale. That money, I said, became the down payment on this house. Ethan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. That's not funny. I'm not done, I said. My hands were shaking now, but I didn't stop. My parents' life insurance paid out $4 million. This house was purchased outright for $275,000. Every utility bill, every property tax payment, every repair over the last 7 years, roof, plumbing, HVAC, all of it has been paid from accounts my parents left me. The room felt like it tilted. Ethan turned to Uncle Robert. Dad? Uncle Robert hesitated. Just for a second, then he nodded. It's true, he said quietly. Carmen owns this house. Naomi's chair scraped against the floor as she stood abruptly. You never told me, she whispered. All these years, you never told me. I never made it an issue, I said softly. We were family. I didn't think it mattered who paid the bills. Ethan stared at me like I'd slapped him. His expression shifted, shock giving way to humiliation, then something darker. His lips pressed into a thin line. His eyes burned. This is unbelievable, he said slowly. So you're saying you've been letting us live in your house like charity cases? That's not what I said. But it's what you meant, he snapped. You let us think this was a family home. You let us plan our lives around it. I almost laughed. Almost. You were planning my life for me, I said, without asking. Naomi looked like she might be sick. She sank back into her chair, hands trembling. I didn't know, she whispered again. Ethan, I swear, I didn't know. The celebration was gone, completely. The wine sat untouched. Plates were cold. The air felt sharp, hostile. Ethan stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. This isn't over, he said, pointing at me. You think flashing paperwork makes you some kind of hero? You're tearing this family apart. He stormed out of the room. Naomi followed a moment later, her face twisted with confusion and something that looked painfully like regret. Before disappearing upstairs, she glanced back at me, hurt, betrayed, unsure who she was angry at. I stayed seated. My heart was pounding, but underneath it was something else, a quiet certainty. Because as awful as that dinner had been, I knew one thing with chilling clarity. Ethan wasn't done. And whatever he was planning next, it wasn't going to be subtle. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, tight with rage, humiliation simmering just beneath the surface. Naomi's expression haunted me more. Not anger, not cruelty, confusion. Like the ground beneath her had cracked and she didn't know where to stand anymore. By morning, I convinced myself space was the best option. I got dressed quietly, grabbed my coffee, and left for work without speaking to anyone. The house was eerily still. No slammed doors, no whispered arguments, just silence. I told myself it was good, necessary. Work was a blur. I reread the same email 10 times without absorbing a word. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from Naomi. An apology, a question, anything. Nothing came. By the time I drove home that evening, a tight knot had settled in my stomach. The kind you feel before bad news, before you know exactly what's wrong, but your body already does. I parked in the driveway and walked up to the front door. The key wouldn't turn. I frowned and tried again, pressing harder this time. Nothing. I pulled the key out, stared at it like it might suddenly explain itself, then tried the back door. Same result. That's when my heart really started pounding. I walked around the house, testing every entrance, all locked, all unfamiliar. The metal felt wrong under my fingers. The locks had been changed. I stood there in my own backyard, staring at the house I'd lived in for 7 years, trying to understand how it was possible to be locked out of your own life. Then a window slid open upstairs. Ethan leaned out, his face twisted with something close to triumph. "You're not taking this house from me," he shouted. "You can't just throw out a pregnant woman. This is my home now." Then he slammed the window shut. I stood there, stunned. He had changed the locks on my house and was now claiming I was the villain. I walked back to my car and sat there gripping the steering wheel, my pulse roaring in my ears. This was Naomi, my sister in everything but blood, the person who'd held my hand at my parents' funeral, the person whose baby I'd been excited to love. Could I really do this? Could I really call the police on them? I sat there for 20 minutes arguing with myself. Part of me wanted to wait, to talk, to find some compromise. Another part, the part that was tired of swallowing discomfort to keep the peace, kept repeating the same thought. What compromise did he offer you? None. He demanded, then retaliated, then committed an actual crime. Kindness wasn't working. Silence hadn't protected me. And love, apparently, had conditions I hadn't agreed to. I looked up at the house, lights glowing warmly inside, and realized something sharp and painful. They weren't confused anymore. They had chosen. So I chose too. I picked up my phone and called the police. The dispatcher was calm, professional. "Do you have proof of ownership?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "The deed is in my name. I have the documents. Officers will be there shortly." Those 30 minutes felt endless. I watched shadows move behind the curtains. I imagined Ethan planning the nursery, imagined him congratulating himself on winning, imagined Naomi convincing herself this was necessary. When the patrol car finally pulled up, relief and dread hit me at the same time. 2 officers stepped out, both older, both with the weary look of men who'd seen too many families tear themselves apart. I explained everything: the dinner, the demand, the revelation, the locks. I showed them the deed, digital and physical. My lawyer had told me to keep copies close after the dinner confrontation. At the time, I thought she was being overly cautious. Now, I felt grateful. The officers exchanged a look. "Let's talk to them," one said. They knocked. Firm, official. Ethan opened the door. The moment he saw the uniforms, his expression shifted. Shock, then anger, then a carefully constructed mask of victimhood. One hand immediately went to Naomi's stomach. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice suddenly small. The officer spoke calmly. "Sir, we need to talk about this property." Ethan launched into his story. "My wife is pregnant. We live here as a family. She felt unsafe after being threatened, so we changed the locks." The officer raised a hand. "Sir, this house belongs to her," he gestured toward me. "You changed the locks without permission. That's illegal." Ethan's mask cracked. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "She can't just throw out a pregnant woman." "You have 2 options," the officer said evenly. "You unlock the door and leave voluntarily, or you'll be arrested for trespassing." Ethan's face drained of color, then flushed red with rage. He looked at me like he wanted to burn my life down. "You'll regret this," he hissed. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, he came down with a suitcase. Naomi followed him. Her eyes were red. Her face looked shattered. "Carmen," she started. "Not now," I said gently. They left. The locksmith arrived soon after. New locks, new keys. As the officer prepared to leave, he paused and looked at me. "Family disputes are always the hardest," he said. "But sometimes the people who love you most hurt you the worst. You did the right thing." That night, I lay in my bed, in my house, staring at the ceiling. I felt sick. I felt guilty. I felt heartbroken. But I didn't feel wrong. And for the first time, I understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. Being family doesn't mean surrendering your rights. And love doesn't require you to disappear. The house felt too quiet after they left. Not peaceful, just hollow. Like a soundproof room where everything you say echoes back at you, distorted. I kept expecting to hear Naomi's laugh from upstairs, or the familiar rhythm of footsteps in the hallway. Instead, there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock over the stove. Uncle Robert and Aunt Elaine came home late that night. They'd been at a friend's place, unaware of what had unfolded. When I told them everything, Uncle Robert sank into a chair like the weight of it had aged him 10 years in an instant. Aunt Elaine cried openly, apologizing over and over, saying she never imagined it would go this far. "We should have been clearer," Uncle Robert said, rubbing his temples. "We should have told Naomi the truth years ago. We thought we were protecting everyone." "You did protect me," I said softly. "You tried. But protection only works when everyone respects it." 2 days later, Naomi called. For a split second, hope flared. Maybe she'd cooled down. Maybe she'd finally seen what Ethan had done. Her voice was cold. "We need to talk about what you did," she said. "What I did?" I asked. "You humiliated Ethan," she snapped. "You called the cops on us, on a pregnant woman." "He changed the locks on my house," I said evenly. She brushed it off like it was nothing. "Dad always called it the family house. When I reminded you I bought it with my parents' insurance money," I continued. "You didn't argue that. You argued that I was selfish." There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. "You didn't have to throw us out like criminals." "I didn't throw you out," I said. "Ethan did, when he broke the law." She exhaled sharply. "You could have just rented an apartment. You're single. We need the space." And then she said the thing that hurt the most. "Mom and Dad would be ashamed of you." The words hit deep, deeper than anything Ethan had said. I felt my hands shaking, but my voice stayed calm. "My parents taught me not to confuse love with self-erasure," I said. "They taught me boundaries." She laughed bitterly. "Real family doesn't keep score." "The only score I've kept," I said, "is every time my generosity was mistaken for obligation." She hung up. Later that night, Aunt Elaine sat with me at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen from crying. She told me something that made everything click. "Ethan's been complaining about you living here long before the pregnancy," she admitted. "The baby was just an excuse." That hurt, but it also clarified everything. This was never about privacy, never about vulnerability, never about a nursery. It was about entitlement. That evening, Aunt Elaine made my mother's lasagna, the recipe she used to cook when I was a kid. The three of us ate quietly. Naomi's chair stayed empty. "Your mother would be proud of you," Aunt Elaine said gently. "Boundaries aren't betrayals." For the first time since everything started, I believed it. Because love that demands you disappear isn't love. And blood, no matter how thick, doesn't guarantee loyalty. 2 months passed before I felt steady enough to tell the rest of the story. Life didn't magically smooth itself out after that night. It just moved forward, quietly, unevenly, like learning how to walk again after a bad fall. Naomi gave birth 3 weeks ago, a baby girl. Uncle Robert and Aunt Elaine visited the hospital. When they came home, Aunt Elaine showed me the photos on her phone. Tiny fingers curled around Naomi's thumb, a soft pink blanket, a face so small it almost didn't look real. "She looks just like Naomi did as a baby," Aunt Elaine whispered, smiling through tears. I smiled too. And then I went to my room and cried alone. I should have been there. I should have been holding that baby, memorizing her face, promising to protect her from the world. Instead, I was the family member no one mentioned out loud. Naomi texted me 3 words after the birth. "She's here. Healthy." No picture, no name, no invitation. I replied, "Congratulations." She never answered. Uncle Robert has tried. God, he's tried. Phone calls, messages, offers to mediate. Naomi and Ethan won't consider reconciliation unless I apologize and give up the house. My lawyer told me to disengage. My therapist told me it was okay to grieve people who were still alive. That part surprised me the most, because the hardest thing wasn't losing the house drama or even the confrontation. It was grieving the sister I thought I had, the future I imagined, the version of family I believed in for 7 years. Meanwhile, life kept happening. Work is going well, better than I expected. There's talk of a promotion. I've started building friendships that don't revolve around obligation. I joined a rock climbing gym, started cooking actual meals instead of surviving on leftovers. Therapy helps. Dr. Patterson reminds me, gently but firmly, that choosing myself doesn't make me cruel. Uncle Robert and Aunt Elaine live with me now. They insist on paying their share. It's strange, in a good way. Clear boundaries, mutual respect. We eat dinner together most nights. Quiet dinners. Honest ones. A few weeks ago, I found a letter tucked into one of my old boxes. It was from my mom, written not long before the accident. "Don't confuse generosity with erasing yourself," she wrote. "The people who love you will never ask you to disappear." Reading it felt like she reached across time to steady my hands. Naomi and Ethan are struggling financially. I've heard it through the family grapevine. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for fixing it. Maybe one day Naomi will see what really happened. Maybe she won't. Either way, I've learned something I won't unlearn. Real family doesn't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Boundaries aren't betrayals. Self-respect isn't cruelty. I didn't choose this ending, but I chose myself. And for the first time in a long time, that choice feels like peace.